one of the Rosquit members that is really have a very clear design practice. So Tommy, originally from Finland, living and working both in Finland and in Switzerland, um, uh, uh, bringing in those very profound design approaches, and not only with Swiss Gold, but on many different levels and aspects. Um, so I'm very pleased that he's here with us. It's the third module of this, what we call the people module. The first one was about it was from Tess Broekman, who was explaining how the link between people and programs. That was the main course of that. So how programming and other ways of processes will be introduced in your design when you look at the people first. I was last week together with Anna Bondar, mainly focusing on legislation on one hand, but on the practical tips and on participation on the other hand. So very much about the process. So we didn't design at all last week, but we looked into the process a lot. And this week, I think we have what I call a human-oriented design. So very much people-oriented. So how do you design when you put the person in the middle of your idea, of your concept? Maybe Tommy will slightly rephrase this, but this is the reason why I asked him and his projects to show. Again, like 3 weeks ago, there might be more international projects, but I will probably once in a while make the link to some Ukrainian relevance. Why do we think that this is also a good example for Ukraine? So I break maybe once or twice. I will break in during Tommy's lecture to see if we can strengthen the link to your future practice or nowadays practice as well. So I think, Tommy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me. Hello everyone. As Fulko already said, I'm Tommi Makynen. I'm an architect and urban designer based in Zurich, but with roots in Helsinki. With my partner Miriam Niemeyer, who's also part of Rosquit. She has been teaching at Connections in Kiev, so we know Ukraine a bit already since years. We run an architecture and urban planning office called Helsinki Zurich. You see part of the team in the photo. That's the Zurich team there. And today I'm going to share you some thoughts of how we, as designers and urban planners, can give new life to public and in everyday places. I think it's especially important in the context of crisis recovery and displacement and our own role as architects and urban planners is changing also with this kind of perspective. We can become more mediators, but we're getting more into that later on. I've given a few lectures already in Ukraine about different issues involving urbanism, urban planning, urban design, and urban development as a whole. And why is this topic now important? I mean, there are, of course, a lot of other things which are very important currently as well. But I think that the fact that the situation that has changed, there are war-torn cities, there are internally displaced people, there are constraints with resources. I think in this context, public space matters even more, not as a spectacle, but as part of the everyday life, as something which is trust building and giving you a sense of belonging and identity. I think this requires that we think of public space in a new way. We have these grand squares and monuments, grand facades we have considered as public space, and they have their value in many ways. They can change, usually, hopefully, they're well-studied typologies. There's a lot of literature about public space in this traditional way. But having space itself is not enough. I think at their worst, these kind of spaces give a little value for citizens. If not used, they become symbolic but empty. In cold weather or in cities under stress, they might even feel alienating. This particular square is in front of the house where my parents live in Helsinki, and it's always empty. It's over-dimensioned. It's a sign for me about how differently one can think of public space. There has been a culture in Finland where public space was, to have that was a value in itself in cities, in city planning. But that was it. And I think this square currently going through a new process of design. We're not involved, but I read about this. It's showing that these kind of spaces can be also dysfunctional and actually kind of counterproductive. So we have to be thinking of new ways, looking at different kinds of public spaces. So if we want to offer, and I want to try to offer you this another way of thinking now, not just thinking of public space in this traditional or even kind of heroic sense, but like meaningful everyday spaces, bus stops, schoolyards, street corners, sports zones, where people actually spend time, where they meet and rebuild communities. So I will try to cover 5 topics, 5 key takeaways in this presentation. First, we look at people first, focus on those. Secondly, we will talk about openness, which I think equals resilience. Third, appropriation, equaling belonging. 4, staging plus enabling social interaction. And 5, building back better as a chance, and it can give new meaning. As Fulco mentioned, we're going to have some international examples along the way. I'm not going to dive very deep into them. I'm going to try to also talk about them in a way that they will, hopefully, you can see the connection. But Fulco, as said, you are more than welcome to make that connection if I'm not going to be doing that bridge myself. So let's go. People first. We are all different. There's not a universal person, and everyone is a potential user of public space, whether it's children, the elderly people, whether it's displaced persons or people who have been living there for a long time. Everybody has their own needs and different rhythms. And our design, the way we think of designing these places and producing these places must somehow embrace that diversity. This image of that perfect person is exactly there to contrast that there's not like one single person that we can design for. We have to think of that diversity. And it is also very important that we think of this from the point of view of safety and inclusion. These spaces are there to bring people together. And if we think of refugees or displaced people, public spaces can be sites of places of even danger, exclusion, or invisibility. So we have to somehow be actively responding to this. The image on the right-hand side is a project from London. They had riots 10 plus years ago, and there was a community project afterwards, the Peckham Peace Wall, where from the community where the riots happened, they collected hundreds and hundreds of ideas how to actually make the community and those public spaces safer and more inclusive. This wall is, of course, it's a symbol of how to go about with this. And I think this is kind of, a small hint in the direction where we're going with this lecture. So we should design for people, and that means more than aesthetics. Design is not about aesthetics only. It is about comfort. It's about dignity. It's about accessibility. It's maybe about simple gestures. It's about places to sit, benches. It's about shade. It's places to rest, and so on. These matter. These kind of basics matter, especially when resources are very scarce. There's a lot of, again, a lot of interesting material observing this or using this. There's a nice small film from the 80s, The Social Life of Small Urban Space. You can watch it on YouTube. It's about observations of how people actually work within certain space. And I suggest that you have a look at these kind of things, because it's very much about small things and how these small things actually work for a bigger whole. And this is now where we look at two first examples. First, we zoom out. Our office in Zurich was hired to work on bringing the city of Schaffhausen to the riverfront, which was cut by a street, a lot of traffic. And at the same time, even if we're in Switzerland and the resources you might think are not scarce, even here it's a huge political topic about how much budget can be used for things, who owns the land, and so on. So before we did anything, the goal was clear. We needed to kind of reconnect the city with the riverside to create places for people, for different kinds of people to walk, rest, and meet, spend their time, not only tourists, but mostly locals. So what we started doing is that we started mapping what's already there, thinking of very situative, small-scale interventions, which, of course, were embedded in a bigger plan, but at the same time were kind of modularly thought in a way that they can be, you can start somewhere, do those quick wins, and then move on. And with a long term of time, things will add up to a bigger scheme. So this may be the first thing I suggest as a way of thinking about, is to look at what is already there, what can be used. And this is exactly what we did also in another example. This is a city in eastern Finland, which wanted to somehow make an urban renewal for its city center. Not a very successful city center. It used to be very much about shopping. Shopping moved on to online, and the center was somehow leaving um, a lot of emptiness, less and less activity. And what we did is that we started again by mapping what is already there, qualities, making them visible, showing potential in places, building upon the existing, improving some modest spaces so that everybody could somehow start understanding, okay, we actually have quite a lot of things here already. So not trying to make big gestures when adding things, but actually doing small gestures, but things that add up, and framing that into a narrative which helped people, the local politicians, to understand that actually we have pretty interesting things here and we should just make that more visible. So it was very much about storytelling. And actually, the city um, decided afterwards to um, design characters, a bit like in a Pac-Man kind of game kind of characters, who were then given different kinds of ideas of how they are using the city, which was then brought online and into posters into the city. So there was a narrative actually then on how to give people, kind of make it visible what they have here and how could they actually use the city in a new way. Second, we're looking at openness, which creates resilience. Openness is about flexibility and adaptability. When spaces are that, they are accessible, multifunctional, they can adapt also to unexpected uses. And that's a vital thing if we think of recovery contexts. Again, here, an example from Switzerland where you would probably think that resources are not scarce, but due to traffic planning, it's a small municipality close to Zurich, Schlieren. Due to a change in traffic planning, suddenly the city was left with a four-lane street, 200 meters long, unused. Nobody knew what to do with it. The city didn't have the means. The municipality didn't have money to actually invest in new public space. They didn't have the immediate means to actually turn it into any kind of development either. So what they did basically, that they gave it to the citizens without any bigger funding. Um, Neighborhood groups were invited to use that space in whatever way they wanted to. Now there's an association called Piste 52, which is German, but it's just about, basically the name of the street. It used to be the or the road 52. And people have taken the liberty of doing different kinds of actions here because there is more than enough space. And I think this kind of openness, which we see here, is something that gives possibilities for people to become part of the whole themselves. It makes for something which is difficult to design, but I'm going to try to show you in two examples how actually we try to bring these kind of ways of thinking, this flexibility, this openness into designs which we do um, for projects in our office. There are two examples, both currently under development, still not built yet. One is in Germany, in Munich. It's a center of old part of the city. And the other one is a completely new town square or event square in Andermatt in Switzerland. So how do we do this kind of flexibility? How do we try to work? How do we design for future growth? So we should not design fixed elements. We should try to design a framework which allows different kinds of ways to use that space, so that they don't become fixed monuments, but actually room for change. We don't know how these places are going to be used in the next decades, but they should stay there for decades. And these places need to be able to evolve over time with how the needs of the community also evolve over time. So what we do here is that we think of different scenarios. We try to dimension the space in a way that it can accommodate very, very different things, from ice hockey rinks to concerts to Christmas markets. This is maybe very special in this case, as it is kind of meant to be an event square. So it was kind of the pre-programming of it was already there, that it needs to be that flexibility. In another example, in this old town center of Mosar in Munich, it was much about doing less, making again sure that we are leaving space. Currently, there is just an open field, but we were asked actually to design small cultural building on that site. And we knew that it's going to be a very political issue actually to fill that space, because that space has been there for decades and has been traditionally used for different kinds of community activities. So we knew that we're going to face opposition with the no project if we're not going to be safeguarding this public space as it is. So that was, again, part of it is that we need to not only test and make sure that it works for all of these uses, but we have to also be able to show it in order for showing the community that it actually will work also for them. And the new additions that we are adding towards this situation, that they are actually adding value to the whole and not something which is actually taking something away from it. Appropriation equals ownership and belonging. It's the third point. So when we make, or when people make place their own, they feel belonging. It's not about ownership in legal terms, but it's about a sense of agency. It's about caring of a place. It's about identifying with a place. And this is very, very important when thinking of new people coming together in places. How do they feel that it's their own? Are they allowed to make it somehow their own? This is, in many situations, it's also a very generational issue. How do we invite people to feel that they are actually allowed to be part of that place? I think often appropriation is achieved by very, very small scale, low cost interventions. It doesn't involve grand design. On the contrary, it's about temporary things. It can be temporary seating. It can be about murals. It can be about community gardens, as we saw in the previous slide. It can be about street sports. These kind of things, they build trust. They show that this is ours. They show care and invite people to become part of it, telling that this is something that actually belongs to us. It's mine. This space is mine. It's yours. It's ours. There are a few concepts that I think support the understanding of this. I like to think of the city as a loft for everyone, a common land for everyone, um, a fallow as something which is free, self-organized, kind of a creative void. I think these kind of concepts help us frame appropriation as kind of a right and opportunity of people. So it's not, again, it's not about legal matters in that sense. It's more about inviting to take space and become part of it. Here are two books which Fulko was asking me earlier if I had some ideas for reading for you guys, and I unfortunately didn't answer that. But maybe these are, and there are several other books on these kind of topics of urban commons and city as loft, which show a lot of examples about how to appropriate space. And I think the book on the right, well, there's a big start with the book on the left. It's written by some colleagues of mine from where I used to teach architecture and urban design before. And it kind of gives you a catalog of different kinds of projects in different kinds of places in Europe, giving you ideas of how appropriation of space can take place. The book on the right-hand side is more about policies. So it's more for people who are actually working on the municipal side and with NGOs, giving them ideas of how to actually work with these kind of urban commons, as they are called. This kind of openness, common lands can such. I think both books are valuable, very, very different, and there's a lot of more material on this since this has become something of a commonplace also in very many Central European countries in the last decades, where the industry has moved away, left these kind of waiting lands like industrial brownfield sites where actually nothing is happening, but they are giving opportunities for different kinds of uses. Few examples of these kind of things. Here's a Helsinki example, my hometown example. There's an area very central in Helsinki, industrial site called Suvilahti, which was established as one of a very, very successful music festival, urban music festival in Europe called Flow. I think it shows very well how to reuse and appropriate and how that space and how that becomes identity creating. It's very low cost, based on cultural and based on community. As part of the festival area, the festival is of course taking place only for a few days a year, but it has grown to actually occupy a very, very big area and has this special police for itself. But it has also ignited and inspired a do-it-yourself skate park, a very big one, which actually also has grown from that, very small thing to something which is actually also has an international value. There are international pro skateboard competitions organized there, and it has become a very vibrant area without actually much of an investment from the municipality, from the city itself. Another much more low-key example from Zurich, Stadion Brache. Brache is a German word for fellow. There was an old stadium in Zurich, a football stadium. It was dismantled, so said that it's too old, isn't, it's nothing for the current requirements of that game. But the process of building a new one ran into problems, political problems. The financing was problematic. There were neighbors who were very conscious about their rights. And what happened is that since now almost 20 years on that site, there's nothing much happening officially. But unofficially, there has become a very vibrant place, a bottom-up development where community gardening, different kinds of festivals, concerts are taking place almost on a weekly basis. It's something with a lot of community value. Generation has grown up with this and remember this whole place very fondly. And we're all here in Zurich very excited on seeing whether there's ever going to be a real estate development on this place because of that bottom-up situation. Such a big kind of ownership feeling of the local community has grown that even if it's informal, but it has become very powerful also politically. So public space, for me, it's very much about staging social interaction, giving a basis for social interaction. A place becomes meaningful when it invites encounters of different kinds of people. Best public spaces are open across generations, between locals, newcomers, between institutions, between citizens, and design can set this stage. I think in the image we see a very, very beautiful example of this. It's of course has cost something. It's still low cost. It's a recycled facade of an old department store that has been built into an open air library, which is community run, totally recycled. Also, the contents are recycled, the books are recycled. At the same time, it's actually a noise barrier and a stage for the community. I think this is a very beautiful image. It's a beautiful project. But maybe even more interesting is how it actually began. The money was still not yet there. They didn't have a sponsor for it. So even if it's low cost and recycled, it still cost, of course, something. But what was done was that there was an idea that we need to do something about the neighborhood. People were moving away from it there. It was uninviting, unattractive to live there. And they built basically the same architecture which we see here, the same setting, the same stage, kind of the open air library, the stage and everything, out of empty beer crates. So there was a mock-up 1-to-1 temporary building built out of beer crates. And that somehow gave the community and the power and let's say the courage to actually go for something. And they received, in this case, EU funding actually for realizing this project. So I think this is very much again, it's a very community-led thing, which shows that on the one hand, communities have a role in building their own public spaces, but that the public spaces themselves are also generators of that community. But it can also, of course, be in much more simple elements. It can be just benches, kiosk corner. It can be playgrounds as meeting points. It can be a ping pong table. This is a very, very interesting, also low-key project, low-budget project. If you want to have a look at this Common Monem in Mannheim in Germany, which is very much about with low-cost interventions generating and activating public space. So even the modest elements are vital. They become a nucleus for interaction. Outdoor gyms, street sports, playgrounds, they are real-life social stages. Movement brings people together, informal interactions emerges, and they are very good in these kind of recovery contexts. The image here is, of course, it's built, it's been designed, but it's modular. It's something that can be recycled. It's a playground in a refugee camp in Lebanon, showing like multiple opportunities for people to use them. I think it's a beautiful example of something which works for different generations, offering reasons to come over and spend time. But I think design should go beyond form. Programming gives reasons to stay. So this is something like curating and activating programming space that matters. Creating events, markets, workshops, community meetings, mass yoga events, whatever, that somehow gives reasons for people to get together, stay there, and return is important. So placemaking, I think we should view it as something as actively inviting people to appropriate space. It's not just something that we do a design and hand it over and that's it, but we invite use. We invite adaptation and community creation. Barcelona has had a very interesting project called Superblock, which they have been implementing in very many different neighborhoods and in areas where basically there was no public space available. They basically, what they did is that they changed just the traffic regime. So instead of, they took some lanes from the cars and just painted over the lanes, and very, very low cost mobile furniture, some greenery pots were placed there to see what happens. And this has been working incredibly well. I actually had the possibility to observe a few of these places myself, and it's incredible how people have taken them like so strongly for themselves. And it was hard to imagine that these places didn't actually have that possibility earlier on. So in a city very dense, such as Barcelona, suddenly new life emerged. So thinking of now building back in the Ukrainian context, should build back better. And it's not only about reconstruction, it's about and restoring what was there, but creating new layers of meaning. So it's about inclusion, creating resilience, creating something for the collective memory. I think we should see that these public and everyday spaces and places, they are infrastructure for trust. They're something trust between different people. They are trust between people and institutions, citizens and city, newcomers and locals. Of course, design plays a key role here. These are these elements that I have been showing you in already in several examples, but we're going to have a look at it a bit more. Designers become mediators, so our role shifts. We're not anymore designers making beautiful plans or beautiful designs. We are mediators and enablers. We frame possibilities. We bring stakeholders, people together. We enable the agency of the community. We're not dictating what should happen somewhere, but we are facilitating transformation. Several cities in South America, interestingly, cities which have been very poor traditionally, have seen a lot of very innovative approaches to this. Low-cost initiatives on how to turn the give city back to people. And I think Lima is one great in Peru is one of a great example here. A very inspiring low-cost public space initiatives program, which is transforming unused space with very, very modest resources, as we see here. It's about palettes, it's about color, it's about self-built, do-it-yourself infrastructure. It's about involving people to actually make their own living rooms in the city. It's about making places to sit and stay. So I think Lima in Peru is something to have a look at. Very different kind of approach in Northern Ireland, where decades-long conflict had torn communities apart from each other, Catholics against Protestants. In one of the cities which have been scenes for this fighting, Derry in Northern Ireland, they used public space, an old military area, turned into Peace Bridge, connected with the Peace Bridge into the city, which is the swinging bridge you see there in the image. Made it into something which vibrant, giving the city something, turning that, let's say, negative image of the military, which had possessed this place, into something which is inviting people, giving them an event space which was there, not there, and with quite, I must say, also heavy programming, organizing concerts, organizing night markets. Brington Square has become something which is a special place in a very positive sense for that post-conflict city. So we're closing towards the end. I'm trying to pull these things together that I have been talking about. Key conceptual things. Meaningful places are public spaces. We can build trust through space. Even small-scale, very low-cost interventions can build confidence in communities. It is important to plan in an open way to enable appropriation, because that brings resilience and belonging. key thing is that we understand that public space is about staging social interaction. It's a deliberate design task. So I'm maybe posing a few questions for you to think about when you're going back to work. How can you involve residents and newcomers after traumatic situations and loss? How can you integrate local initiatives into bigger spatial frameworks? What role does the Ramada, the municipality or the community play in building up things? I think these kind of questions are important to ask. They will guide your process. Talking about the process, just summing it up, I think we need to start with people, as we said at the beginning. We need to be able to formulate some kind of a vision which talks to a lot of different people. We need a process on how to actually, which is inclusive, to build up that place. And through that process and actually building that place, we also build up community. So practically looking at it, I think first step very practically is to engage early with residents and different kinds of users. Second thing, map everyday places. Understand what are the qualities which are existing, what can be used. 3, prototype with small interventions. You don't have to, go grand immediately, but start small. 4, monitor use and adapt. So, stay agile, see what works, what doesn't work, move forward, and what works, scale it up, and give the ownership to the community, to different people. It might be, of course, that with these kind of international images and so on, that you think, okay, we're not in Latin America here, or we're not in Barcelona, we're not in Switzerland. But this kind of way of thinking, it works in different climates. It works in different cultures. I think we have to believe that these kind of tactics, these kind of pop-up, low-cost, but high-impact tactics work also in different kinds of places. And again, it doesn't cost that much to try it. So start small. This is an example in Kiev. It's maybe not small. It's a very big thing where thousands of square meters of public space was activated just recently. I suggest that you have a look at this example. It's well documented in the internet as well. And I think it's proof of that these kind of tactics that we have been looking at now from different kinds of places actually can work and will have an impact also, a positive impact also in the Ukrainian context. So these cost little, they invite use, they build momentum. We're closing to an end. Think of the stakeholders. It's not only about the municipality, it's about NGOs, it's about users, it's about businesses, and it's about the community and how to make them come together. So all of this exists. The success of public space is not about how much funding you get into it or big monuments, about the looks of it. It's about increased social interaction, bringing stakeholders together. It's about visible appropriation, sense of belonging, safety, inclusion, and everyday use. So with this image here, a very simple thing, young girls in Lebanon, in Beirut, were given the possibility to co-design and co-build their own public space, which they did with love, as you can read in the wall behind. I think I call you all, into action. I hope you found something that you can take with you from this presentation, and hopefully you can, implement some of it at some point in your own work. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tommi, Makynen. Well, I see all hearts and thumbs and applause in the screen. So apparently you touched some positive nerve. Very nice. I I have a start question for you, and then we can also look at some questions in the chat. So you give the example quite often that you say, okay, let's give this space to the residents. Let's enable that the local community or the neighbors that they can do something. What are the tools that you then use is it like a lot of meetings and a lot of talks and a lot of, or is it like, do you organize that everything is legally clarified in advance, or do you need a municipal decrees, or what kind of tools do you have to be activating that in your practice?
That's a great question, and it's not a simple one because it's a very culturally, let's say, related issue. In some cultures, people are kind of more used to appropriating space. So you need to activate them less. There are then cultures where people are kind of more, let's say, haven't learned to do that. It's also a generational issue, I think. Younger people and children are more open. They are not, on the one hand, children are maybe less aware of boundaries, what you are allowed to do, where young people sometimes out of their attitude towards the world are actually reluctant to see those boundaries and challenge those boundaries. But activating people to actually understand that they are allowed to do something or invited to do something is I think the key thing. So how to connect with local people. I think this is the how to find people who are actually willing to do. That's often what I see as the key issue, and it's something of a challenge as well. I'm not a big, there are of course always legal issues. Who's responsible for what's happening in public space? Can you do this and that? So the way we go around with a lot of projects that because in the end, appropriating a street, changing the whole regime of traffic is very cumbersome. So what we do a lot and what we suggest a lot to municipalities is that we say, let's start small. Let's just say that there's, like in the example of Schaffhausen, the riverfront, it was out of the question to get all the street traffic away, car traffic, banning the car traffic. But we said, okay, let's do that so that we say that there's like 4 Sundays a year where the car traffic is not there. So that there are just 4 special days that people can actually take the streets for themselves. Events can be organized. Neighbors can have a flea market or whatever. Young people will organize a party or whatever. So I think if we start from what is legal, what works, and work from kind of that, angle, we will see hurdles and hurdles and hurdles. And, it will become a big, big, big challenging thing. So I suggest starting small, temporary, maybe seasonal, maybe very, very just occasional things, see what happens and do learnings from that. So kind of, creating those special moments and then finding the people who would be willing actually to, take the activity into their own hands and do something about it. So it's very much about communication, finding the right people, finding the way, to pass by the regulations. And I
No,
don't mean
that
now being
was
illegal about everything, but I mean that kind of finding that loophole, or a way to deal with such a thing.
yeah, that is the experience at this moment a lot. That yeah, as soon as you start many initiatives, the first question is it legal? And you actually say try to avoid that question as long as possible, and do something
Yes,
which makes sense together and small. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Some questions from the chat, maybe. Oh, we are with quite a large group by now. Very nice. Maybe Anastasia Bojenko, you had a clarifying question.
Yeah, my question was about this case on stadium in Zurich, and maybe I would like to maybe ask the question broader is about this appropriation of space and contradiction between community and municipality, community and developers, and maybe you could elaborate more on this case or other cases, how to deal with such conflicts, how this in your context, for example, because sometimes, unfortunately, we have this contradiction with municipalities and community here in Ukraine. So I would like to know more about this. Thank you.
Sure.
We called this positive protesting a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, because that is very often this conflict is very often there from the start. So did you experience that
Yeah.
in other projects for yourself as well?
Yes, I think this is it's a very interesting question. There's like in this particular case in Zurich, it was clear that the stadium was dismantled because there was a plan to actually build a bigger, grander, better stadium to it. And why that didn't happen was that there was actually complaints by the neighbors. And just because there are a few neighbors complaining about this issue, it ran into political problems. And just because there was this space, and Zurich actually it's not a big city, but it actually does not have too much public space. It's in that sense the opposite of Helsinki, whereas there's like too much public space for the amount of people. In Zurich, there's almost too little, and immediately where then there was this, kind of land which was just waiting that somebody, would start developing it. First, there, some people started community gardening there. It grew, their friends came over. Somebody built a grill and started inviting other friends to, spend their weekends there. Nobody was living there, but just a place where just to gather. Somebody then some enthusiastic people started using some spare material of the old dismantled stadium and build some sports infrastructure. You see there in the image in the background, you see, I don't know if you actually see I'm not sharing anymore now.
The presentation is off. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So So I think there was this kind of very small step-by-step thing, word of mouth way of how it kind of just developed and grew. And I think the key thing was that there was a few of the people who came first. They were open enough. They appropriated the space, yes, but with the philosophy that, hey, this is for everyone. It's not only for me. Even if I, do my own 5 square meter gardening project here, there's a lot of space for everybody else as well. So that's how suddenly the whole thing just grew and grew. And in the end, I haven't been there now since a while, but it grew into some because it grew actually so popular. It was just one of those spaces where suddenly you could do things. It was a bit on the kind of nobody knew what was exactly legal and what was illegal. But since there were these gardens, there was in a way a social kind of security, social surveillance at place as well, because there was always somebody doing gardening. So it didn't become something of a place where, let's say, problems were arising, but it was actually this very positive vibe that was continuously there, and people were very kind of aware that it could be that this will end up any time, like next spring. It could be that we are not allowed to be here anymore. I think this awareness kept it very, very kind of low, kind of low scale, low maintenance, low cost, and very light. And that was the beauty of it. And I think that's still the beauty of it. And I hope that also some future generations are actually going to be able to continue with that. And I think one one interesting thing about it was that it was the bottom-up thing was then organized to an association, which
Mhm.
which so there was everybody could enter that association. Doesn't cost anything. There was no finances or anything, but it was very much just about governing this area yourself. So it's maybe a special case. I think the Swiss mentality fits very well to it. Switzerland is not a very top-down culture. On the opposite, it's kind of people have kind of take the responsibility into their own hands about themselves, but also about the community. So it is definitely something which, if I would try to think of that in Finland, for example, I would think that it would be something that some young, very urban people would, find attractive and interesting, could do it. And there are examples in Helsinki like this. But a big portion of the population would somehow feel, that that's not my thing. And that's also fine.
I think you also kind of answered the last question from Gilda about um, how are they being cared in time, so the association. And maybe because I'm on the phone and with very bad connection, so maybe Margot, can you help me or to translate the Ukrainian one, because for some reason it doesn't work here, to see how those questions can be addressed to Tommi as well.
Mhm.
But it's interesting to see that it was an association there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is a key thing somehow to understand that, yeah, kind of you have to accept in a way that there's some point, appropriation might need some kind of a way of organizing yourselves in order to be able to keep the openness to other people and their initiatives,
Yeah.
and to share. It's of course sharing might lead to conflicts as well. And then I'm aware of this kind of thing, and I think that's what it's very much about, try to have an open mind, create a culture of tolerance, set up a framework for how people can interact with space. And this is something where I think that municipalities can actually support. They don't need to invest a lot of money, but they need to kind of, help support in actually enabling that things happen.
Bogdana, maybe you can ask the question in Ukrainian. That's also possible, or Margot, indeed. I see you now present also. So Olena can translate.
Да, це не питання.
Actually, this is not a question. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Tommi, for your wonderful lecture. Actually, it resonates with me a lot because we represent Natalka Park, and we actually started the participatory processes in Kiev. We were one of the first ones to start this tactical urbanism, this small-scale interventions, appropriation, contacting all sorts of population groups. So here I have a comment rather than a question. Dear Kievan residents, please come to us. I invite everyone to have a guided tour in our Natalka Park. I can say that since 2015, we have been planning this park. And actually, the result you see today and the plug that you see today, that it was supported by the Klitschko. Believe me, in 2015 it started as a wasteland. No one paid attention. But those interested are all invited. I will be happy to give you a guided tour. I will tell you how we came there. We appropriated this land. We mapped it. We made a mosaic with featuring the map of Ukraine. And in 2015, we engaged the IDPs from Luhansk and Donetsk, which were the occupied territories then. And so we broke some tiles, and together with the community, we made this mosaic of Ukrainian map. And this was the process which helped us to build trust. Because, people thought that we were political. We came there just for political reasons, and the local residents didn't believe us. But these minor interventions, these processes won us their trust, and local residents believe us. Those people who come to the embankment, they maintain this garden, this Natalka Park. And I would like also to add that yes, sometimes legislation really is a hurdle. And especially for activists, sometimes it is so difficult that activists get tired. When our park was already well maintained, I can say we got tired, but the local community can change the rules. For instance, not a single park in Kiev has a director, a CEO, but the Natalka Park has it. And so the community asked us to have one. And yes, the legislation was changed for our Natalka Park. And yes, we have a legal CEO, so you can change the rules in cities. And this is caused by the active community which intervenes and which shows that constructive dialogue is possible, and not just if you do not only yell, treason, treason. So again, everyone is invited for an excursion.
What a great example.
Very nice. Yeah, Tommi, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's really good to hear, and I think that there's so often, I think this was a bit of the discussion already earlier, that the legislation, and if you start, trying to find a way through the current system, there's a lot of culture which is going to be saying, no, you can't do that. It doesn't work. It's not possible, not with us. I'm not going to take the responsibility and so on. And I think that's a bit of the, this is in many other cities and cultures, countries, it has been like this as well. I think there has been just kind of a shift, a gradual shift towards something like this, which has been, maybe taking place in Central Europe since just going to say something like the 80s, where the industrial sites, industry started moving away from the cities and sometimes out of the country, and left these production sites. And then there was suddenly buildings, areas, which kind of unclear who owned them, who was responsible for them. And I think especially these kind of things, the book City as a Loft describes very nicely how these kind of examples have worked and how they have been organized and so on. So I think I'm not the person of planning tools myself. I'm more like, let's do a illegal party. Let's just go gardening. Let's, make a picnic here kind of person. And I think it's a lot about, making that first step, seeing what works. And I totally, I have a high respect on everybody who's, doing that kind of thing as we just heard about, even making a CEO for a place. So it's about finding that way. So there is a way if there is a will, and I think that's a great learning of that example.
Okay, I think this is very nice and very inspirational. And thank you, Bogdana, for your example, and Tommy to lift it more up. I would say if we don't have any more questions, then maybe I would say what also helps, Tommy, is that you have such a calm voice. So when we were thinking about positive protesting, you just calmly tell the way it is, and that is very, very nice. That is also something that many of us can learn, because if you're talking about the narrative, so we discussed that last week also in participation, how do you stand up? How do you approach it? If you do it in the calm way, how you did it, it's very convincing and very nice to have your experience from many different countries, not only the rich ones, not only the most safe ones, but many different countries. How you expressed that in this presentation. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to me, having me. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for the great questions. And next time in Kiev, we're sure gonna take a look at the park.
Let's do. Yeah. Lilette, back to you.
Thanks a lot, and until next time, hopefully not too long from now. Thanks a lot. On the request also of Olena, and I think a lot of others, we will first have a short break just to get a little bit the heads empty, and then continue with the input of Margot on Nizin as we promised. We already sent you the material, but she will elaborate a little bit on it and continue. So unlike other times, we come back to the common place, so this Zoom space after the short break. And for now, we say goodbye to Tommy and thank again.
What time do we come back?
See you in, let's say, exactly at 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock Ukrainian time. Okay.
See you.